I mean, if David Bailey had the energy to get up here and face you all this morning, then we know we're going to have a good day. It's really fantastic to be here. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Gareth Jenkinson. I'm the head of multimedia at Cointelegraph. I've been writing about Bitcoin since 2017, so fair to say I've seen some ups and downs like the rest of you have. It's been 5 years since Michael Saylor announced that Strategy would convert its fiat treasury holdings into Bitcoin. And fast forward to today, Strategy holds 641,692 Bitcoin. It's a staggering amount, and it puts them firmly atop the list of publicly traded Bitcoin treasury companies. Publicly traded Bitcoin treasury companies now hold more than 1 million Bitcoin, and that's crazy to think, knowing that we only have 21 million Bitcoin that will ever be in existence. But today, we're chatting to some big names on the European landscape, because what happens in Europe is definitely not the same as what happens in the United States. So I've got a fantastic panel here to speak to us today, and I think we're going to start with Khing, but just by introductions, we've got Khing from Treasury, Alexandre Laizet from Capital B, and then Sander Andersen from H100 Group. Gentlemen, it's great to be here on stage. Khing, it's been a crazy few days. Congrats on Bitcoin Amsterdam.
Yeah, thanks very much, Gareth, and great to be with you here, and fantastic everyone here come together, and got a couple of very exciting days ahead of us.
Let's start off with where you're at. I'm sure a lot of people in the crowd, a lot of people in the Netherlands are wanting to know where Treasury is at, when you guys are going to be listing. I know you probably can't give a definitive answer right now, but let's start there.
Yeah, sure. We've announced a fundraise of about $150 million and now hold over 1,100 Bitcoin. We were funded by Winklevoss twins, David Bailey Nakamoto, and a number of global investors. We're preparing a listing in Amsterdam through reverse listing. That's in process. And we're super excited to keep building ecosystem with the conference and other things.
Alex, it's been a year since Capital B started its Bitcoin treasury company. Take us back a year ago, how hard it was to start this, and a year later, how much has happened, and reflecting on the success that you've had.
Yeah, so Capital B is Europe's first and largest Bitcoin treasury company. We have started back in November 2024. Back in the day, we were, now I'm being called a veteran, but back in the day, it was Strategy in the US that had started the movement in 2020, then Metaplanet in Japan in early 2024, and Capital B, November 2024, launched the first in Europe. And what's been happening is quite impressive. It's plus 3,000% growth and the most liquid stock on the Euronext Growth Paris market, and the most volumes overall, with a lot of interest from different institutions and investors. And frankly, that's been followed by a massive wave of other Bitcoin treasury companies, and now we have a strong European leaders in the space, and frankly, that's proving that there is a major opportunity. At the same time, it's been also challenging for the overall industry because there has been so much new companies and stable demand, and so the price has been going down a bit. I think you need to take a step back and look at the overall context. It's monetary devaluation all over the world, and what we are doing is protecting the investors from that monetary devaluation and providing for an additional opportunity to maximize the potential returns of Bitcoin.
Sander, H100 Group is the first Swedish Bitcoin treasury company. Can you talk to us a bit about the genesis and the journey so far?
Yeah, so we did a reverse takeover in April this year, and we actually started quite small. We bought 4.39 Bitcoin as the first purchase. And back then, that actually put on top 100 Bitcoin treasury companies in the world. And since then, we have raised 120 million. And we have seen that the Nordic markets has some unique opportunities. And we see that international investors are seeing the opportunity in the Nordics. And also now we see more and more adoption locally, especially on the credit side when Michael Saylor entered the credit market in Europe.
I want to talk a little bit about how to start a treasury company, because there's lots of different flavors. You know, someone like David Bailey has been on, I guess, the really difficult front of a pipe deal that has very depressed prices right now. That is just one way of listing or starting a Bitcoin treasury company. Obviously, Treasury is doing a reverse listing. H100 did a reverse merger, and I think Blockchain Group at the time was already listed, right? So there were different ways of expediting the process. What's the best way to do it? What's the easiest way to do it? I don't think there is an easy way to do it, but Khing, maybe we can start because you've got a very good background in this.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It really depends on the market you're in, as in jurisdiction, on the opportunities there, but also the market environment. And certainly for us in the US obviously led this whole wave with first MicroStrategy and then a number of others. You saw that it took over time more time to list through, for instance, a reverse listing. So that's now become a less attractive method in the US. Certainly in Europe, it's still an effective method. And I think overall, the other thing is the markets are clearly always in flux. And there's always the question whether you raise your money privately through a so-called PIPE, private investment in public equity, or publicly in other ways. And the best way there is an at-the-market program, selling shares in the market. So it really depends on all those things. I would say at the moment where we are, I still do think that the pipes are an interesting way. We raised our money through a private round, and then from there on able to grow, and then grow into the public markets.
Sander, maybe you can jump in here and just give your general thoughts on how you approached it versus a pipe offering or something like that.
I would say like the most important thing, especially as an early stage Bitcoin treasury companies, is the investors you have with you, and what time of time horizon and what type of volatility they are prepared for. We were very lucky to be backed by Adam Back very early, and he's been crucial for us to structure the raises and the capital in a way where we attract long-term holders. So I would say like the investor base is the most important thing you do to get a good speed out of the gate.
Alex, can you talk a little bit about your process and how you eventually decided to go for a Bitcoin treasury company, considering what the company was doing before?
Yeah, I think a Bitcoin treasury company really has 3 different stages. The first one, when you start, you build a very strong capitalization table, as Sander mentioned. You have very long-term oriented investors, like we have as well, Adam Back, Fulgor Ventures, UTXO Management, Tobam, the first asset manager in Europe to implement a Bitcoin fund and a Bitcoin treasury company fund. And when you have raised that amount of capital, about 1,000 to 2,000 Bitcoin, then you go out to the institutions, the early stage BTC native or curious institutions. And we've had the likes of Generali and the likes of comparable to Generali, but in other regions. And we have added more recently with a raise of 58 million euros back in September. 30 plus additional institutions. Now we are at 40 different institutions in our capitalization table, and 90 plus different countries over retail and institutional investors. And so that provides you with a view of what can be the growth in the first phase, the second phase of early institutionalization. And the third phase is really when you reach a critical size above 5,000 to 10,000 Bitcoin and probably even beyond, is when you are in the capacity to actually issue publicly listed securities that provide a form of credit exposure to investors. So to put it simple, not everyone in this room want necessarily to have the full volatility of the Bitcoin treasury company. Probably some of you want only Bitcoin, some of you want Bitcoin with a potential outperformance of Bitcoin, and some of you also may want maybe 10% yield on a stable way. And probably different type of investors will have different allocations. And a Bitcoin treasury company is really building the central bank for digital capital markets. So that is the ambition at Capital B since the beginning, is to build the largest balance sheet on the continent and to be the best credit issuer on the continent, to allow for different types of investors to get the exposure they want and to keep away the volatility they don't want.
You made mention of your balance sheet, right? If I look at the key metrics here, Capital B has 2,818 Bitcoin. Treasury has 1,111 Bitcoin. H100 Group now has 1,046 Bitcoin. But Sander, you mentioned that you started small, right? Does it actually matter how much Bitcoin you have at start? I'll start with you and then I'll throw it over to Khing because you guys aren't listed yet. But when you do, investors will know that you have a sizable position of Bitcoin or a sizable holding of Bitcoin on your balance sheet.
I think how you start is more dependent on what type of management team you have. And we had the opportunity to create a lot of momentum very early by starting small, and it fitted our team and our investor well. So I would say that was our way of doing it. I think it's multiple way of doing it. The most important thing is that you have the long-term view on Bitcoin and Bitcoin capital markets. And if that's integrated into the management team, I see multiple strategies being very successful in this industry.
Khing?
Yeah, for us as well. The investors we had are real Bitcoin core believers. So for them, when we funded the deal, it was very important to have that Bitcoin immediately and start with that. And that is kind of unique, actually, because, for instance, in the US, most deals still have to wait until they can buy the Bitcoin. And then clearly starting with 1100 is fantastic. And the goal of a Bitcoin Treasury company is to grow Bitcoin per share over time. So that's obviously the main thing we're working on, is to grow through different parts of the capital structure and able to grow that balance. Being having a listing on Euronext Amsterdam, which we're in the process of, is obviously a key benefit of it being a great and a very liquid exchange. So that's part of the thesis for us.
Let's talk about that. Does it actually matter what stock exchange you're listed on as, capital markets become more and more accessible around the world?
Yeah, there is obviously a key thing for a Bitcoin Treasury company is liquidity, and different exchanges have different liquidity. The other thing that's very important is the regulation around it and what it allows for. Again, US is kind of leader in this. What's important for what strategy has shown is at the market programs where you can issue equity in essence every day to buy Bitcoin, and being able to issue a whole load of debt instruments, converts, pref securities. And the beauty is in Euronext Amsterdam, all of those are at our fingertips.
Yeah. Alex, I'm going to take it back to you. You got ahead of the market in Europe. How important was that for the growth of Capital B in particular? And is there still room for more players to come into the industry at this stage?
Yes, there will always be room for competition. In fact, we are happy competitors, and we are literally on the same mission to accumulate the most Bitcoin possible. At the end of the day, what we are doing is really decentralizing Bitcoin. It doesn't seem like that, but it is the case. Through the demand that we provide in the market, there are now several tens and tens of banks that are now providing Bitcoin custody. That provides more Bitcoin custody options for individuals, for corporations. And so overall, I'd like to say, yes, we are competitors, but at the same time, we contribute to buying more Bitcoin, holding it forever, and contributing to the overall adoption of Bitcoin through those institutions. Then in terms of competition, there will always be different risk-return profiles. You will always have, well, first of all, we are all competitors of strategy and of Metaplanet. And so you always have a different risk-return profile when you have a company. Maybe you will more identify with the strategy of Metaplanet, Capital B, Treasury, H100. Yes, and so there will always be room. At the same time, as I mentioned, there are certain sizes where you can do certain things and certain steps where you can really accelerate and issue products that have a significance. Because when you look at the Bitcoin that strategy is able to acquire through the preferreds, well, you can do the parallel, and if you have very small number of Bitcoin, then it's not really that significant today. It will be tomorrow, but it takes a bit of time. And so, yes, the exchange is important, the capital market is important, the financial instruments that you can issue are important, and the size matters a lot, because when you work with institutions, what they see is what is the size of your balance sheet, what is the volumes of your market, what is the volatility of your stock. And so that's been quite fortunate over in France at Capital B, is the capacity to have the most liquid investable Bitcoin treasury company over the continent today, and I'm sure that you will have as well over time. And that's definitely something that matters for investors, and that's something that maximizes the capacity to raise more capital and to increase more Bitcoin per share.
I've had some interesting conversations with various people in the wider cryptocurrency industry in recent months, and Arthur Hayes was one person that kind of said to me, there's going to be a handful of Bitcoin treasury companies that will win in their markets or overall. And he pointed at, obviously, strategy. Michael Saylor had such an advantage, and he's released so many different products now that are tied to Bitcoin. Metaplanet was a really fascinating example, just given the way that Japan taxed Bitcoin and how kind of difficult it was to buy and trade or hold Bitcoin in Japan. And they just figured out this beautiful way to take advantage of the tax advantages of investing in Japanese stock markets. And I think that's why Metaplanet is so successful. What is the opportunity in Europe? And why are you guys so bullish on your companies? Khing, I think we'll start there.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we're with 450 million Europeans, and the one big benefit of a Bitcoin treasury company is very easy access. And both goes for individual investors, just want to buy it in a trading app, or for institutional investors. And both are massive opportunities. For individuals, again, it's also people who are new to Bitcoin. It's very easy. You're buying amplified Bitcoin. And for institutions that have many times have restrictions in what they can buy, which venues you can use, it's very easy. So both are very, very large. I agree with over time, like any industry, size kind of tends to matter. So there will be overall probably a couple of key players in each region. And about competition, I like to think we're all competing with traditional finance more than with each other. That's the most important thing.
Sander, do you want to jump in on that one a little bit, just on the opportunity that you see, just considering it's only been 6 months or so since you guys launched?
I think each market opens up for different types of opportunities. And speaking for the Nordics, we have less bureaucracy. We have a lot of trust in the society. So executing strategies and products is relatively faster in the Nordics, and that of course opens up one type of opportunity. But on the other side, I think what we need to spend more time on is the Bitcoin capital markets. What will happen on top of Bitcoin? How can we make the Bitcoin capital markets more efficient? We will see more tokenization project. Maybe this is the way where Bitcoin treasury companies can collaborate to create one deep global market built on top of Bitcoin. I see that as a mission and something Bitcoin treasury companies should focus on. And then over time, maybe where you're listed will be less important. But to take the Nordics again as an example, 40% of Swedish listed bonds is non-credited. Credit rated, which means that the Nordics are very used to investing into products that doesn't necessarily need to be prepared a year ahead. So I would say like each individual market opens up for different opportunities, and therefore it's also very important for the investor to look into the local capital markets to when they do a decision on which Bitcoin treasury company they should invest in.
I just want to gauge the room very quickly to see people's appetites. Does anyone here, I'm not going to say, do you own any Bitcoin treasury stocks, because I don't want to dox anyone or do that, but are you interested in owning a Bitcoin treasury stock? I'm going to put up my hand because I'll say yes. Okay, there's quite a few people. Are you interested in owning Bitcoin in a self-custodial way? Okay, a lot more people. That's teeing me up for the next question. Why would I invest in a Bitcoin treasury company stock versus self-custodying Bitcoin? And I think when you look at it from an institutional perspective, it makes sense for institutions. But for people in the room that could perhaps buy strategy stock on eToro, why should they do it? What are the key metrics? How do they decide what company to put their money into? Khing?
Yeah, I think if you buy a Bitcoin treasury stock, if that company does a good job, if the management team executes well, then that stock should actually outperform Bitcoin. Because it does two things. On the one hand, it uses some leverage on the balance sheet in a smart way. And secondly, it can do something with the Bitcoin at some point. And if you look at strategy itself, I think the numbers from the last report were over the last 5 years, Bitcoin is up 30% per annum, and strategy is up 50% per annum. So, so that in itself, I think, could be a reason. The other one's obviously easy access, and perhaps it's just it's a form of allocation, right? If you're a core Bitcoin holder, then to get a bit of, I guess, amplified Bitcoin exposure, you buy into a Bitcoin treasury company.
Alex?
I would say if most of you are already owning Bitcoin today, it's probably because you like shorting the euro, probably because you believe that the euro is going to zero. Well, the Bitcoin treasury company is a double short. You have the opportunity, to short the euro first time with Bitcoin, and every time that we raise capital with a form of financial leverage that an individual cannot access, you double short the euro. And when you buy Bitcoin the first time and then you have to wait, well, the Bitcoin treasury company is literally buying Bitcoin for you every day. So when you see at the beginning there is a slight premium that you pay against the Bitcoin, that is the price that you pay for a dedicated team that will work for you every day for their entire life to buy you more Bitcoin for you and your family. So that is really the difference of Bitcoin versus a Bitcoin treasury company. It is not this one or the other. It's this one and the other to maximize the number of Bitcoin over time at the end. So a Bitcoin treasury company, you can also see it as a form of infiltration of global capital markets, and in a way that you will have all the banks that will surrender to you in the future because they will have no choice but to accept your Bitcoin, because you will be sitting on a pile of capital that is literally the best money on earth and the best collateral on earth, and probably because of all the financialization that is happening, you will have the capacity to not sell your Bitcoin anytime soon because the financial system can provide you with some loans against it to buy your house, and that the stocks you don't have to sell as well because it's capital. One day I had a sovereign wealth fund that asked me the question, and what is the exit strategy? When do I get out? What is the right answer? The answer is never get out. When do you get out of Bitcoin? You don't get out of Bitcoin because you don't sell your Bitcoin, because for what will you say it? What a Bitcoin treasury company is literally Bitcoin plus future Bitcoin. It's compound Bitcoin. So a Bitcoin treasury company is really the capacity to expand your ability to buy Bitcoin in the future without having to work for it. So that's a future extension of your past proof of work.
I love that. I love that a lot. Sander, I'm going to ask you to... Yeah, there we go. Let's give him a round of applause. There you go. That's your first orange pill for the morning. Sander, when it comes to the KPIs that Bitcoin treasury companies should be focusing on, a lot of people talk about MNAV. Maybe you can just give us a quick TLDR and what pretty much everyone is focusing on across the board.
I don't think the KPIs has changed or should change. I think we are, what you do when you invest in a Bitcoin treasury company, you invest in a management team that work for you to accumulate as much Bitcoin as possible. And I think Bitcoin per share is still a very good metric. Of course, you will have how much do you get diluted on the other side. But at the end of the day, you will see Bitcoin per share as the main KPI also going forward. When it comes to the MNAV, each low MNAV opens up for a lot of new types of opportunities, new products coming to the market, especially to the more risk-averse investor. So I actually estimate that Bitcoin treasury companies will raise more money at a lower MNAV because that will attract more institutional capital. But on the other side, what's good with Bitcoin treasury companies is that you have tools to monitor and actually capitalize on a high MNAV as well, which opens up for opportunities in every type of cycle in Bitcoin and also more specifically Bitcoin treasury companies.
I've also had the opportunity to chat to a lot of founders of alternative currency, digital asset treasuries, whether it's Ethereum, Solana. The Winklevoss twins invested, directly in Treasury, and this week they announced that they're launching a Zcash treasury company. And my question to you guys is that the real competitor in the room now, these alternative cryptocurrency digital asset treasuries? And are they going to try and eat some of your pie?
No.
There we go. That's a very straight answer. Khing, maybe you can elaborate a bit more.
So yeah, look, Bitcoin is a base. Bitcoin is digital gold, and Bitcoin treasury companies are the absolute core of this whole industry we've created, and that's where the growth will be. Obviously, Bitcoin itself is Gold 2.0, so there's the upside is tremendous. I think there's a few select currencies, cryptocurrencies that have a real reason to exist that makes sense in a DAT format, in a treasury format. I think in the last hype cycle summer, we've seen a number that don't really have a reason to exist in this format, or maybe altogether. And we've seen the market respond on that. Zcash is very interesting, where Bitcoin is a hedge against fiat. In a way, Zcash is a hedge against Bitcoin, and certainly the privacy element of it. And again, like anything we were saying before, if you're a core Bitcoin hodler, you have your own stack. If you want a bit of amplified Bitcoin, you buy a bit of any of the treasury companies. And if you feel privacy is an important issue to you, then Zcash is another one, and it's easy access.
Yeah. Alex?
Well, I will have quite a different view. I think that all of our crypto assets have zero reason to exist, except for one. If you still have some, you can buy Bitcoin with it.
Yeah.
And so the second reason to exist is when we tokenize capital B stock and you can buy it with digital assets. Well, you can sell your crypto assets, buy Bitcoin, and then buy the Bitcoin treasury company. So I think that is because of the centralization. You cannot have something that is a hedge against a decentralized network that is a centralized network. And you cannot have a decentralized thing that is decentralized without a link to digital, to the real world. And Bitcoin is the only asset on Earth that is backed by 21 nuclear reactors all around the world. And so I don't even know what is a DAT. I don't know. A DAT is something that's been marketed to raise capital from some investors that believe in something that doesn't really exist. What exists is Bitcoin backed by 21 nuclear reactors over the world. What exists is people that are working every day to acquire Bitcoin. And the main use case for different crypto assets other than Bitcoin has always been for the founders to buy more Bitcoin with it. So don't fall into this, and at least buy Bitcoin and probably look at Bitcoin treasury companies.
Well said. Very, very well said. Ladies and gentlemen, we are out of time. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. We've got a jam-packed day ahead, so don't go anywhere. Enjoy Bitcoin Amsterdam. Thank you.